Hey guys, welcome back to my Veganuary vlog. Today I'm going to talk about the F-bomb, the F word. This talk's been inspired by an unfortunate circumstance that occurred the other day when my 8-year-old daughter dropped the F word in front of a family member, and luckily no offence was taken and certainly none was intended. And I also want to preempt this talk by saying I also mean no offence or judgment with anything I'm about to say. I simply want to share some wisdom and experience around this topic and hope that I inspire and support some of you to strive towards being the absolute healthiest and happiest version of yourself that you can be. So that's my goal with what I'm about to talk about. So back to the F word. The word I'm referring to is fat. A sensitive topic for a lot of people. It elicits a lot of different responses and emotions and can have the potential to damage a person's self-esteem in that very short breath when it's uttered. And so it is a sensitive topic, but one that I think needs to be brought out into the open because we're dealing with a rising epidemic of overweight and obese people these days. So I'm just going to drill down into that and talk a bit more about why we're seeing that trend, why it's important that we start talking about it and working out ways to address it, and how to go about doing that. So, Australia's big fat truth. The statistics that I was able to find on this were with regards to the adult population from the 2011-2012 bracket. More than 60%, I think it was 62 or 63% of adult Australians over the age of 18 were considered overweight or obese. And with regards to children between the ages of 5 and 11, back in 2011-2012, I think it was more than a quarter of children within that age bracket were in the overweight or obese range. And that trend is an escalating trend. So since then, the numbers have likely gone up even further. So, what is that? How does that classification come about? How do people become classified as overweight or obese? So basically, that is dependent on your body composition and what your body fat score is. So acceptable levels of body fat differ between adult men and women, and there's also differences based on your age range and also your fitness goals. But for men, the average ideal body weight is under 17%, and for women it's under 24%. And just to put that in perspective, I'm a 39-year-old woman, I've had 3 kids, and my body fat percentage is currently, based on my last test, 23%. So I'm at the upper end of normal, healthy, ideal body fat when it comes to body composition. So hopefully that will sort of help to get things in perspective with regards to the population and how things are changing with regards to trends, and how what's considered normal these days is not always healthy and it's not always ideal. So what is fat and how much do we need? So fat does have a lot of important roles in the body. It cushions your organs and tissues, it's a shock absorber for your bones, it's an important part of your brain, it helps your immune system function, it's involved with hormone production and fertility. There's a lot of other functions that I can't remember right now, but it's involved with fat-soluble vitamin absorption like vitamins D and K, and it helps to maintain healthy skin as well. And so if you drop below a minimum essential body fat level, a lot of those functions will be compromised or impaired, and so you may see things like impaired fertility or poor immune system function or bad skin as a result. So essential body fat for women is around 10 to 12%, and for men it's as low as 2 to 4%. So how do we make body fat? Body fat's produced from the fats that we ingest in our food. Makes sense, right? Fat creates fat. But a lot of people seem to be under the misguided notion or belief that carbs make you fat. Carbs are the enemy. Carbs are what we need to be worried about. It's actually really inefficient and really difficult for your body to make fat from carbohydrate. Fat is easily converted to fat in the body. Carbohydrate, not so much. It is a process called de novo lipogenesis that's required. Google that if you want to spend a good 3 to 5 hours reading papers on it and look into the biochemistry. But it is really inefficient. Your body prefers not to do it. When you eat carbs, it's the primary preferred fuel of the human system, and so your body just wants to burn them up and utilize them. You can certainly make fat from carbohydrate with that de novo lipogenesis process, but you need to be eating almost an obesogenic diet, so huge amounts of calories and sustaining that sort of diet for long periods of time, much in excess of your needs in order to convert carbohydrates into fat. So you can do it, but as long as you keep your calories within your estimated requirements, or lower than if you're wanting to lose body fat, then it's really not going to happen. So stop worrying about the carbs, worry more about fat. So what's the deal with those, high fat, high protein, low carb diets? How do people achieve fat loss when they're eating that way? So you can get short fat loss in the short term eating that way, and that's because when you eat a diet that's higher in fat, usually you feel sick, so you don't want to eat as much. Or you just feel satiated for longer periods, and so by default you tend to ingest fewer calories. And so, calories in versus calories out. If you're eating less calories than what you need to meet your body's daily requirements, then you are going to potentially, depending on a few other things that we'll talk about soon, go into fat burning mode and start to burn up some of your body fat stores. But that's in the short term. When you look at the long-term consequences of those types of diet, they're linked with things like erectile dysfunction, cardiovascular disease, and a number of other conditions. And I'll link some resources below tomorrow's video where I'm talking a little bit more about carbs, so you can look into the studies on that. But it's not sustainable. People that are under-carbed are usually hangry, so if you can relate to that, you're probably not eating enough carbs. So, to summarize that, if you need to lose body fat, don't cut your carbs. Focus more on reducing your fat intake. It's the fat that is more easily converted to fat in your body. And if you're eating a standard diet, so not a whole food plant-based diet, pretty much any other option, it's very likely that you're eating too much fat. The healthy, ideal, recommended fat intake is as low as 10 to 15% of your calories. And if you're eating a typical diet, you're easily doubling that. You're most likely getting a minimum of 30% of your calories from fat, and it's way too much. So there was actually a study on that compared the body fat percentages of vegans, vegetarians, flexitarians, and people on a typical standard diet. And so the vegans consistently, on average, had body fat percentages within the ideal healthy range. Vegetarians were up into the slightly overweight range. Flexitarians were even a little bit higher, and the standard diet population was well into the overweight and obese range. And so there was a minimum of a sort of 5% differences in the body fat percentages between the vegan population and the standard diet population. So fat creates fat. I shouldn't need to keep saying it, but I will. So there's something else I wanted to cover, which is kind of a little hidden secret about fat. So there's all of those functions of fat in the body that I talked about before, but there's another role of fat in the body. Fat is basically your body's protector. So it is the toxic waste dumping ground for your body. So anytime you're inhaling toxins or you're ingesting them in your food, or you're working in an industry that's really toxic, like you're a painter or you're a panel beater or you lay carpets or a hairdresser, your body's taking in a lot of toxicity, or you live in a really toxic environment, like say you live near a piggery, for example, your body has to do something with all of that toxicity. And we have these detoxification pathways. So the liver and the kidney are really important organs, and that's one of their primary functions, is to pull toxins out of your bloodstream, process them, and get rid of them. And if your detoxification pathways are working efficiently and you're not taking in more toxins than they can handle, then you will just wee most of the toxins out. But the problem with society these days is we live a really toxic lifestyle in a really toxic world, and a lot of the chemical toxins and contaminants that are abundant in our environment are lipophilic, not hydrophilic, and so they prefer to be deposited into fat tissue. And that's how that bioaccumulation thing happens, where as you go up the food chain with, say the bigger predator fish, then the chemical toxicity per pound of their muscle weight is much higher. It's more concentrated in their tissue, and that's because the toxins get concentrated in the fats. So with that, so your body's trying to protect you. It's trying to put the toxins somewhere that's not in your organs, and it's not going to cause cancer. It's putting it somewhere safe. It's trying to keep you safe. And fat is the safest option. It has very little blood supply, and your body can just keep pumping the toxins into that. So if you can't get the toxins out of your body, that's the only other place where it can store the toxins. Unless you're growing a baby or you're lactating, in which case you're going to pump the toxins into your baby's tissues or into your breast milk, but that's a whole nother topic. So your toxins go into your fat, and what happens then is that the fat cells enlarge. So they've got to keep getting bigger in order to store all of this toxic waste that keeps pouring into them. And so they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they get altered as well. And then the body ends up in this inflammatory state. And so often then there's problems with insulin resistance, and you're predisposed to all of those lifestyle diseases that are linked with obesity. So that's like your cardiovascular disease, your diabetes, your arthritis, your cancer, hypertension. They're all a direct result of holding on to too much body fat. So there's the physical consequences of that. There's also the emotional consequences of that, and emotional reasons why the fat's there in the first place sometimes as well. So, we store a lot of physical contaminants in our body fat tissues. We also store a lot of emotional trauma in our fat tissues. And so when you release your body fat stores, not only do you physically get lighter, but often you feel emotionally lighter as well. And sometimes a lot of stuff will come up, and once you process it, if you're aware of it and mindful about it, and you process it and let those emotions be released, some of the fat stores will start to melt away as well. In releasing your fat, and I'll talk about how to do that in a minute, in releasing the fat though, you're also going to release all of that stored toxicity into your bloodstream. And so you're really going to need to reduce the amount of toxicity coming into your body and support your detoxification pathways if you want to lose weight in a way that you're not going to end up getting poisoned. Because by losing weight, you're releasing all of the toxicity. It's going to sit in your bloodstream. You need to be able to get that out. So Sarah talks about that a little bit in the interview I did with her. Eating organic produce, making sure you're drinking adequate amounts of pure distilled water, cutting out the dairy, which is one of the most toxic foods you can consume, and then engaging in some detoxification practices like coffee enemas. So that's how you can support those detoxification pathways. But there's another part of the story as well. But wait, there's more. So a lot of us are really rushed these days, and Dr. Libby Weaver is a nutritionist, and she's written a great book on, it's called Rushing Women's Syndrome. She's got a few books. There's another one called Accidentally Overweight. And this book goes a lot into the biochemistry of the body in a way that's really easy to read and understand. And she talks a lot about how women take on too much these days, and we're constantly rushing and trying to get everything done and meet everybody's needs, often at the expense of our own. And when we're doing that constantly, day in, day after day, and then often having an upper to get going in the morning like a coffee, and then a downer at the end of the day like a wine in order to be able to relax, and we're putting a lot of load, toxic load, on our livers, which is making everything worse and making your body need to grow more fat in order to store it somewhere. And you're upsetting your hormone balance. So your body's going to think that it's in this famine crisis because you've got so much cortisol going around your body, and the biochemistry of our brain hasn't evolved enough to be able to recognize what's going on. It just thinks that there's an emergency, and then the reaction of your body is to go, hold on to those body fat stores, we're going into a famine, because that was the main emergency crisis that we encountered throughout thousands upon thousands of years of evolution. So that's where our brain biochemistry goes, and so it becomes even harder to release the body fat because you're in this high cortisol state all the time. So let's talk about how to release the body fat. First, you need to get your cortisol levels down. So that's doing things like yoga or meditation or whatever you engage in that you find relaxing and that gets you into that meditative or peaceful state. So that could be painting, or it could be pottery or some kind of craft activity for you. It might be going dancing, but find what it is that helps you to counter all of that cortisol release with activities that bring it back down to normal levels so that your body can get out of that fight, flight, panic mode. So get your cortisol levels down. Getting adequate rest is also going to be really important for that. And adequate rest is really important as well when you're processing a lot more toxicity. So as you're releasing your body fat stores, the toxins are pouring out, you need to get enough rest to be able to have the energy to process all of that as well. So sleep's really important too. And everyone's much happier when they get enough sleep. So that's another thing. Stop drinking alcohol. Not only is alcohol going to increase your calorie intake for a day, because one glass of wine is equal to like 3 slices of white bread when you're looking at calories, and it's completely devoid of nutrients as well. It's also putting a load on your liver, which is the organ of anger, so you're more likely to be triggered, and it's just another toxin that your body's got to deal with. So cut it out. You don't need it. Try, if you really feel like it's a crutch for you, then just try giving it up for 30 days and see how you feel. If you can, also reduce the number of stimulants that you're drinking, so things like coffee, because again, that's putting a toxic load on your liver that it's just another thing for you to deal with. And that will help your cortisol levels recover as well, because every time you drink a coffee, you're spiking your cortisol too. So that's all the sort of preparation things that you need to do. With regards to cortisol, though, it's also essential to be aware of the kinds of exercise that you're going to start engaging in order to burn up your body fat stores. So if you're doing exercise that's really stressful on your body, then it's counterproductive, because you're just going to continue spiking your cortisol, and so then your body's not going to want to release the body fat. You also need to get a bit of an understanding of the mechanics of exercise. So to burn body fat, burn like a fire, needs oxygen. It's an oxidative process. And that can only happen if you're exercising in the oxidative range. So that's the fat burning or the fitness range. So you need to start learning about your heart rate, be able to check your pulse, and there's online calculators to work out for your age bracket what is your fat burning range of heart rate. And there's a lot of exercise types, particularly if you're unfit, that will take you out and beyond that range, and you end up in the anaerobic zone, which is really stressful on your body. It's going to spike your cortisol, and you're also not going to burn up your body fat. So you're better off doing steady state exercise that's less stressful on your body and keeps you in that fat burning range. So that might mean just going for a brisk walk for 30 minutes every day. It's also important, though, to incorporate some strength and muscle building exercises into your regime, because by building skeletal muscle, your body fat percentage will naturally go down, and you'll also amp up your metabolism, so you'll be able to burn body fat quicker as well. You'll even burn it while you're sleeping, so how good is that? So that's the exercise component, and that's one of the reasons why we've got this rising obesity epidemic these days, is so many of us are incredibly sedentary compared to how we're naturally supposed to be moving. You know, we're working on computers, we're driving in cars a lot, we're commuting, we're on mobile phones, and instead of getting outside and climbing trees and surfing and doing all of those wonderful things. So, you know, we need to start changing those habits and those patterns. So that's the exercise part of it. Now, what else? There was something else I wanted to cover as well. So the food, you know, obviously if you want to lose body fat, then you need to take in less calories generally than what you require in order to give your body the triggers it needs to start going looking for other fuel sources and burn up your body fat. And like I talked about before, don't be worried about carbs. You're better off increasing your carbs so that you've got more fiber coming into your system, which is going to help with waste removal and reducing your fat consumption. So definitely whole foods plant-based is the way to go. Ticks another box. Try it out. It's really awesome. And then the final part of the puzzle is that whole detoxification thing. Really look at how you're going to support that detoxification process, both physically and emotionally. But on the physical level, it's about reducing the number of contaminants coming into your system and ramping up the ability of your body to deal with all of the extra toxins that are going to be released as you start burning up your fat stores. So that's it. Probably a really long video with a lot of detail in it. Actually, there was one other thing I should cover, is if you're really going to start looking into this and working towards a healthier, more ideal body fat range, you do need to get an awareness of how much food you're taking in and all the extra calories as well, like things like alcohol. What your ideal intake needs to be and how that looks. So using something like one of the apps that's a nutrition planner can be really helpful for that. So there's one called MyFitnessPal, there's another one called Chronometer. You can utilize them to start to get more awareness around what's a healthy portion of food, how much food you actually need in a day, because often we eat for lots of other reasons that aren't hunger driven. So that can be emotional, it can be you're bored, it can be that you're going somewhere in 2 hours and you might get hungry while you're out, so you better eat now. There's lots of reasons. So just get more awareness of that, become more mindful about your food, not only your food choices but how much food you're eating. We have such an abundance of food readily available these days. It's really easy to overeat, and it's acceptable in society as well. We get these huge portions when we go to restaurants, and a lot of our sort of cultural practices are all about food consumption, and there's usually way too much food. So just become more mindful of that and really start to check in with how much food you actually need and what your genuine hunger triggers are as well. And intermittent fasting is another great thing to consider as well. So that's something I've talked about in a previous video. That's something I practice. It not only will help to support your detoxification processes, but it will start to stimulate your body to burn up your body fat, because when you do your exercise in a fasted state, you're going to start burning up the oxygen more quickly than if you had just eaten a whole fruit smoothie or something, and you've got all that glucose to use first. So that's it now, I think. But wait, there's more. No, that's it. No knives for sale. Important topic, a hush one, the F word, really sensitive, and I really genuinely hope that I didn't cause any offense. Certainly none was intended. I just think this is a really important topic for people to become more aware of and to start prioritizing. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with one of the numerous lifestyle diseases that everybody seems to be getting these days, because everyone's too fat. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people. So just think about that, and don't take it on as an emotional drama or whatever. It's just something that you might need to start looking at, and you might need to change if you want to become the happiest, healthiest version of yourself that you can be.